Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Microsoft Minute, hosted by Echo Store. My name is Steve Caprio, and as always, I'm joined by Chuck Salvo. Today, we're going to be discussing some new features that Microsoft had announced on an AMA around Purview Endpoint DLP. Purview is an area that we haven't covered extensively in any of these video series, but we have touched on it in certain ones for sure. It's a large set of tools and capabilities, so there's a lot to cover there. But in this case, we just wanted to highlight some of the improvements to Endpoint DLP because we thought they were meaningful and would expand people's capabilities when it came to the endpoints. We'll just go ahead and get started and talk through these things. And this will also be accompanied by a blog post with a bit more detail in there for users, and as well as a link to the AMA that did happen so that you guys can get a look at that straight from Microsoft as well. Get started here. The Macs. So previously, Endpoint DLP was something that was not supported for Mac endpoints. That is now available to users. So for our customers that have significant Mac footprints, if not most of the environment is Macs, if they were doing Purview DLP for endpoint down to Windows devices and wanted to roll those same policies out to Macs, it was previously not possible. So there's no more gaps there. So that was a kind of a nice one to hear about. And Macs are difficult across the board. Intune for a long time has been able to manage the Macs, but has had issues with maybe deployment of packages and things. But from a compliance standpoint, it's done a nice job for a bit here. Knowing that they're trying to patch those gaps and make Macs fully part of what a full security and governance workflow would be is important for admins. So if you have a lot of Macs and you were previously waiting for that coverage, it's now here. So for Endpoint DLP, you can now onboard those Macs as well. I'm not a Mac user, but I know Chuck is. And I know
I would say, as a Mac user, I'm happy to hear Microsoft continuing to embrace the Mac operating system. So good stuff.
Also, maybe you're not going to be happy if we roll out some Endpoint DLP protection, then you're now stuck.
I surely have no sensitive information on this laptop, so I'm not concerned.
And a later announcement in this list of things that we'll talk about might give you more ideas of why something now is impacting you from a DLP standpoint. But another cool announcement, and this is more across the board, but obviously impacts endpoint, but just more AI-powered detection. I think a really big problem with what we had heard about from many of our customers using Purview is not that the rights management capabilities, retention, lifecycle management, all those things are really strong. It just came down to classification of data and the amount of false positives that you might see in the noise. Sometimes it's just how generic the information is from that side. So it's not necessarily a huge ding on Microsoft. It's just that if you have 9 digits in a row, like it can be a lot of different things that are sensitive. AI-powered detection is just adding a bit more context to that. You can train it on your specific data, either internal documentation, trade secrets, client lists, those types of things. And all of that is just reducing, false positives and ensures that alerts are relevant to your organization. If you have a security team or SOC or just yourself as an admin, trying to do those things, you're just spending less time sifting through noise and more time addressing those real risks that are out there.
Do you see like EDM would go away? The exact data minute?
Yeah, to some degree, EDM is like you only want to have identified what is actually your data. So you're exporting your data, hashing it, and then importing it up. And so I think AI-powered detection is going to iterate and make better just standard out-of-the-box classification and some learning. I think if you really did not want to deal with any false positives, then EDM is still your pathway. But it may not be possible or desirable to constantly be running a process that exports your data, hashes it, and uploads it, and has to spend time indexing it. So it could be a chip if anybody is using EDM right now and doesn't like it, testing out the AI stuff might be meaningful for them.
I feel like you need a better result. You have more context, right?
Yeah.
Something that we've always found with Purview was that labeling and also the fear of labeling, right? If you label something incorrectly, it's so much work to fix it. So you're almost like, wow, I've got to be super careful. So hopefully the AI...
And it's why I'm sure there are quite a bit of people out there who have gotten to auto-labeling, but auto-labeling from the entire organization, not just specific classification types, but saying, I'm going to auto-label every single document that's in here, and I'm always going to get it right. I don't think I've seen a customer in our scope of customers that have done that successfully. It could allow people to get closer to that auto labeling where I'm actually applying controls and feeling confident that I'm not over restricting users or having to do that cleanup, like you said, because it is pretty manual and involves admin intervention. Two other announcements, just simpler, more unified policy management. So in the past, you would have to create these policies in different panes. The Purview, as if people who've been in there have probably seen, the menus have changed quite drastically. And I think for the better in many cases. A lot of the stuff that you need to see is all linked together. It's all in a unified single pane where I can do creating, testing, and deploying DLP rules across both Windows and Mac. And, from that point, it's just eliminates any errors or the possibility that an admin who maybe has their hands full with other tasks that day accidentally makes a mistake across a DLP policy, which creates an issue, obviously, that we want to try to avoid those. So any improvement from dashboards or unified policy management, I think, is a win here. And I think having seen it, it is a benefit to go in there and see how they've unified things there. And then user experience. So Chuck, I mentioned if you happen to get caught up in any new DLP endpoint issues with your Mac, a lot of the complaint previously would that users would just get very generic, like you've been blocked, or in what we would call like a mystery block of, I don't know why this is getting blocked. The end user alerts now are much more descriptive, and you have the capability to make those more descriptive. So you can customize those. There's just clear guidance available to users, which should eliminate help desk tickets and like the amount of time that people are spending reaching out to you if you do deploy these things. And it's informative and it helps users understand what you're trying to accomplish on the security posture, right? Is the more your users understand, hey, why is this risky? Like, why am I getting flagged for this activity? The more they either won't try to do it in the future or really understand that, oh yeah, like that makes sense. Like I get why my IT department would not want me doing that. So I think that's another really helpful addition here, announcement from what they're doing.
Yeah, without a doubt. You're trying to get the users to be productive and be safe, but there's nothing worse than just giving them a generic message of, no, you can't do this. Why? Why can't you do this?
And it'll always come off as like a panicked, that'll go straight to the top of the pile, especially if it's a VIP who gets an alert like that, right? It's a scramble drill for the help desk to go and figure that out. And maybe even for them, it's hard to understand. Like, yeah, I don't know why that's happening.
Now you got to chase down logs, you go to the admin center.
Yeah, I think more helpful alerting there where the user can just send that. And maybe they don't understand it fully, but they can send that to the admin and get a quicker answer on that. I think all of it's better for the overall flow of how you're resolving issues or potentially making exceptions to certain DLP rules for certain situations. And then lastly, just better reporting and analytics. I think, again, this is a trend in the admin centers across the board. Usage reports have gotten better. You don't have to use the shell for as many things as you did before, the graph rather now for as many things as you did before. The dashboards are a little bit easier to understand and click through. I can get to the incident details quicker versus digging in through a million different, panes or the fly out windows and stuff and getting lost in there. I haven't dug through, after they've made this announcement, every single reporting or analytics dashboard just yet. But I can say from looking at the other ones and some of the ones that have changed on the DLP side of things that this would be a welcome change because of how noisy sometimes it can be and how much is going on in the Purview portal in general. Streamlining this, making it easier for admins to read what's happening across these various policies and then investigating them and providing feedback to the org or closing out tickets, is just going to be easier with better reporting and analytics. I think, again, we can go through that in more detail. Maybe the next one of these sessions will take everybody through reporting and analytics. I think that'd be helpful. Like, how do I set up my Purview admin center to be able to review these things? But if you're in there and you've noticed any benefit, that's awesome. And I think it'll just continue to get better. And then just a quick note from like the Q&A. So yeah, obviously this was an Ask Me Anything. They covered some new features, but then they had a Q&A session. I thought one of the interesting things that came up in that Q&A session was just the integration with Defender and also SIEM, either native Sentinel as the SIEM or exporting it to other SIEM tools for centralized monitoring and correlations. Those DLP incidents appear in Microsoft Defender automatically and can be exported to those SIEM tools. Just having a single pane of glass again from a Defender standpoint of what some of those incidents were and how they relate to maybe other things that are happening. Obviously, in an XDR situation, you're trying to figure out, all right, like if the DLP thing got triggered and it got triggered in bulk, was a user device compromised, right? And piecing all those things together helps. And from a SIEM perspective, storing it for longer than the logs allow on the Microsoft side, whether that's in Sentinel again or a different SIEM, can allow you to do that for a longer period of time and just have better threat hunting and correlation type activity. So I thought that was an important call out as well, that all of these events are now being stored in Defender.
Yeah, being able to leverage Sentinel across all your security instances is great.
Yeah.
So whether it's external or even internal, now you get a better handle on it.
Yep. And I think, again, we talked a little bit about like how classification was maybe previously a roadblock to auto labeling and those types of things, and maybe even DLP, right? If I can't necessarily classify the data, how am I going to protect it from leaving? So I think hopefully all of this from the standpoint of classification gets better. It enables you to roll out more confidently some of these DLP policies, and then reporting and being able to do things like Sentinel to correlate these with security incidents. Hopefully it leads to even better and more adoption of the Purview portal, and more it's included in at least some of these features. The basic features are included in M365 E3, which seems like the standard license that many customers end up on in the enterprise now. And if you didn't feel like you were getting a lot out of that, hopefully these improvements continue to allow you to capture some more ROI on what's included in a bundle that you own already anyway. And if you are already using it quite extensively, then I think some of these announcements are just going to make it even better for you.
Awesome.
All right. That's what we had covered. Again, we'll publish this out with a link to the AMA, so everybody has an idea of where all of these announcements came from. We are doing a blog that'll have roughly a summary of what we talked about today, but in a bit more detail, and how effort to implement will be in there, why it matters to you, those types of things, so that you can get more in the weeds there. And yeah, as always, we'll keep doing these sessions. We'll keep coming up with what we think are important topics around the Microsoft space or adjacent spaces. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.